Okay, so we are back, and today is the day, ladies and gentlemen, that combat sports has gone into complete disarray.
Chaos abound because
we have what can be described by many as the biggest gimmick fight in heavyweight boxing history. Francis Ngannou, the former UFC heavyweight champion who never lost his belt, but now is a part of the PFL, is taking on the heavyweight boxing champion of the world, holding the WBC and I'm pretty sure lineal title as well. We're talking about the face of the Fighting Furies, Tyson Fury, the Gypsy King. And it's a little bit of a good thing for a couple of reasons and a lot of a bad thing for maybe even more. But you see the smile on my face. I'm watching this shit. I don't care what anyone says. Can Francis Ngannou actually beat Tyson Fury in a boxing match? Is this a good idea to do, and what are the implications of it? The breakdown, let's go. All right, so let's just start out by saying there's a lot of questions around this fight. Why is this happening? Why isn't Tyson Fury boxing a boxer, namely Alexander Usyk, because that is the heavyweight matchup in boxing we all want to see. How the hell did Francis actually pull this off, and how much crow is Dana White eating right now? For one, I'm surprised Dana hasn't announced Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler on the same card of George St. Pierre versus Roy Jones versus Anderson Silva in a triple threat match. Like Dana White, the man that said he didn't do gimmick matches, which was also the same guy that tried to make John Jones versus Tyson Fury in an octagon about 2-3 weeks ago. You know he has to be a little upset that Francis actually got this done, because it was one of the sticking points of what Francis wanted to do while he was with the UFC, and the reason that Dana White came out and said, we don't do gimmick fights. While then a couple of weeks later, almost creaming his pants after Elon Musk decided he wanted to fight Mark Zuckerberg and actually trying to make that fight happen. But he doesn't do gimmick fights. But like I said, yes, this is a gimmick fight. Now, how did this get done on Francis Ngannou's side? Apparently, one of the things he and PFL said was a part of his deal was that he was going to be able to go and box should he want to. He's not fighting in MMA until 2024, so this is one of those things that Francis wanted, and it seems like PFL was willing to oblige him here, which is, again, a win for Francis. One of the things that we talked about when he left the UFC is how bad is this going to be for his career? Is he going to get the big fights he ever wanted? And is he going to be the draw that he would have been had he stayed in the UFC and fought John Jones? The answer now is abso-fucking-lutely, because he absolutely is going to draw with Tyson Fury here. I don't care what you say about the competitiveness of this match that we'll get into, about the fact that Tyson Fury is holding up the heavyweight division longer than a crossing guard at an intersection, and there's an old granny coming through and she's having trouble with that walker. There's a lot to be said there, but I guarantee you they are going to sell some pay-per-views here. It's going to be bigger than anything Francis would have done directly with the PFL had he just gone in and started fighting in the cage. So again, it's more of a win for Francis, but the money that's going to be made here for Tyson Fury for, let's be honest, a fight that's a lot easier than Alexander Usyk, than Anthony Joshua, than pretty much everyone in the top 5, the top 10, the top name the number in heavyweight boxing, is something he's going to do. But before we get into all of that, let's just talk about some of the details of how this thing came about and what's actually going on. According to Ariel Helwani, which I know there were a lot of people that broke this story, but I think Ariel was first in the rumor mill of this thing actually being a possibility, so going to give him credit here. The GOAT. Tyson Fury versus Francis Ngannou will take place, quote, under the official rules of professional boxing, with 3 judges ringside adopting the 10-point must system. Both fighters, however, are promising to meet in the middle of the ring, go to war, and win by knockout in devastating fashion, end quote, per release. That is a bunch of horseshit. Matter of fact, I got a shirt in the closet that represents exactly the words you guys just heard spewed, because none of it made sense and, well, sounds like bullshit to me. Tyson Fury, or any representative of Tyson, saying that they're going to promise to meet in the middle and swing until someone gets knocked out is marketing at its finest. That is no way going to be the case for either guy. To act like Tyson is just going to throw his boxing IQ out the window and allow Francis Ngannou to try to knock him out and risk the lineal and WBC heavyweight championship on an amateur, essentially, a pro boxing debut for Francis Ngannou is nonsense. Ariel asked what the rule set was, and he got met with professional boxing rules. No Marcus of Queensberry, no specific on round time, amount of rounds, and potential sanctioning of this thing, whether it's an actual pro match or an exhibition. No answers there. All we get is, again, per the release, it will also take place in a, quote, regulation boxing ring under the standard boxing rules. Again, that could mean this is a professional bout. It could mean this is an exhibition with just standard boxing rules, like a referee, 6 to 8 to 10 rounds, 2 to 3 minutes. I don't know exactly what the standard boxing rules are. Maybe it's the heavyweight standard boxing rules. So, okay, that means 3-minute rounds. I don't know if we're going 6 to 8 to 10. There's just a lot up in the air here. But the best part of this tweet from Ariel is more about how the agreement came to be between Tyson's team and Francis's. It says, quote, an agreement was reached with Queensberry, Top Rank, and Ngannou's promotional banner, Gimmick Fight Promotions. I'll read that one more time. Gimmick Fight Promotions to partner with Riyadh Season to host the event. So this is going to be in Saudi Arabia, but that's not what you take away. Gimmick Fight Promotions is a direct shot across the bow at Dana White from Francis Ngannou to name his promotional company Gimmick Fight, because of course that's what Dana called this thing. I think that's hilarious. Fair play to Francis for actually getting this done. So there's two ways of looking at this, because yes, it is a gimmick fight, but also Francis getting it done is a massive win for him. So let's talk about the two things here, because yes, the good side is Francis getting paid. Francis doing what he wanted to do as an MMA fan, as a guy that's been an advocate for fighter pay, fighter rights, being able to go against the monopolization that is just the UFC. While the UFC does a great job in most of the stuff they do, most of the time, fighters in the UFC are not paid the same as fighters in the boxing arena, while also being somewhat of the same draw. Like, you're not seeing fighters making millions of dollars for being the same draw as a Gervonta Davis and or Ryan Garcia, or even an Errol Spence or a Bud Crawford, who make millions in the main event of their fights while also not being a massive draw. Francis is also in that same category, and some of the other main eventers and heavyweight and champions in other divisions are. Francis felt he was undervalued, wanted to fight out his contract, and if you guys remember back, according to Luke Thomas, he's got one of the best minds in the game, and he always keeps things in that steel trap. Love the Morning Combat guys. He said this moment was made possible by the fighter lawsuit that compelled the UFC to put expiration clauses in fighter contracts at the time Francis Ngannou signed them. We think about what news actually matters in MMA and where the lion's share of coverage goes. Remember this day. Essentially referring to the fact that Francis was able to fight out his contract and become a true free agent, not a restricted, not a no compete clause. It was a true free agent. And that is how this happened. So like I said, this is a great thing for Francis Ngannou and a terrible thing for the people that pointed Francis and said, hey, this is not going to be a good move for you. It's never going to work. You're not going to make the money you would have made fighting John Jones. And he's probably going to get in there and get his ass whipped by Tyson Fury. I understand. But this was his choice and he did it his way. This is a massive win for him. But let's talk about the boxing side. Tyson Fury is single-handedly behind his gelatinous, flabby, and monstrous body holding up the heavyweight division by doing this match with Francis Ngannou. That's 100% clear. He could have fought Anthony Joshua. He could have fought Usyk. He could have fought a mandatory bout for his WBC championship that, to be honest, is not even really Tyson's fault. Guys like Deontay Wilder and Andy Ruiz were not pressured to make that match so that he would have a mandatory to actually schedule and fight. And just the way the boxing business works, things slip through the cracks and all of a sudden you end up with a fight that doesn't benefit Tyson other than monetarily, which he keeps saying is not the reason he stays around and fights. Doesn't benefit the heavyweight division, keeps it in a lockjam. And let's say that Francis is to land something ridiculous on Tyson Fury and hurt the heavyweight champion of the world. It hurts boxing in a different way than, I know the comparisons are going to be made to Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. Let's take that little comparison, because I know a lot of people are throwing it out there. Floyd was damn near retired at that point. He was on the last legs of his professional career. He was in no way, shape, or form the prime version of himself or championship level Floyd, which is why that fight was a little more accepted and why it made a lot more sense to do it then. You could even argue that it made less sense for MMA that time for Conor, because he was a 2-division world champion. He was the one holding up divisions to go fight Floyd Mayweather, but we all accepted it because Conor was bigger. Despite what Michael Chandler says, he had some pretty big hands for a guy at 155 pounds, and he was looking to knock Floyd out, a harder puncher than Floyd maybe had ever seen. The whole buildup, we remember it. But reality stated that Conor was nowhere near Floyd Mayweather's boxing equivalent, and that's going to be the case here again with Francis and Tyson Fury. And the only thing you can potentially grasp as a way that Francis is going to make this fight competitive is his big-time power. I don't care that Francis wanted to be a boxer. That's what he wanted to train to do before he got into MMA. I understand that, but his power is the separating factor here, and it isn't even really that big of a separating factor when you consider that Tyson Fury has fought probably the biggest power puncher, you could argue, in heavyweight boxing history in Deontay Wilder 3 separate times. Drew with him once. You could argue he won the first fight and then knocked him out in the last 2. Clear victory. So this is not something we haven't seen. Yeah, okay, Francis may be a bit bigger on the actual body size, being around 260 to 270 pounds. But Tyson Fury is 6'9", 290, and has every trick in the book when it comes to the squared circle. He will do things that Francis has never considered or trained for as specifically a boxer. Push-pull, clinch game, putting his weight on Francis, jab, feints, all the things he's comfortable with that Francis isn't. It's a pretty standard fight to break down where Francis has a short amount of time, especially early in the fight, to land big-time power. And yes, Tyson does get hit with some big-time power, so anything can happen. But if not for that, this does seem like it's going to go one way and one way only. Tyson Fury and however he wants this to go. And so that's why it's a little difficult for boxing fans to get on board with here, because their heavyweight champion is not making the fights they want to see. Usyk, Joshua, the winner of Wilder and Ruiz. These fights, while we're seeing the lower weight classes put on classic fight after classic fight, the heavyweights are stagnant. And that is, again, because the face of the division in Tyson Fury is quite frankly refusing to get in the ring with anybody of substance. So I understand boxing fans twisting up their forehead and wagging their finger at Tyson Fury. I get it, man. This one, I actually get it. But I have to say, as an MMA guy at heart, I do love the idea that Francis is getting what he wants out of this. And being also in the influencer crossover boxing scene, I do love the circus aspect of this a little more, because I do want to wonder what can happen here. Even though I know the answer, I want to see one of our guys go over and try it, because we know the boxing guys will never come over to MMA and even consider coming into that cage and doing anything remotely close to a more realistic fight simulation than just the Marcus of Queensberry rules. And that's not a slight to them. They shouldn't have to. They're in their sport. MMA is in theirs, but it is telling that every time there's a big payday on the line, it only goes one way, and that's from MMA to boxing, not boxing to MMA, because even though the sport is not as a whole growing as quickly as the UFC is, it's still on a singular basis where the money is. So fair play to Francis for going out and getting that cash. And speaking of where he's getting it from, we do have to put into play that this will be in Saudi Arabia, and oil money is making a big time return. There's nothing wrong with supporting your athlete. I just wonder if the unlimited funds continue to come from the Saudis, how much more delay are we going to see in boxing? How many more times are we going to see Tyson just either find loopholes in defending his belt or straight up vacate because more money is in the Saudis than actually defending a title? That may become more of a concern in the boxing ranks than people want to admit, but as of right now, how do I see this thing? I think it's two things. Tyson clearly does not want to take tough fights in the heavyweight division right now. He just doesn't, and he doesn't have to because of the loopholes and mandatory challengers for specific belts and committees. And it's just boxing at this point. Like, we all know that this is a sport of red tape and bureaucracy that we never seem to be able to cut through to get the fights we actually want continuously. Thank God for the lower divisions being able to step up and do their part and take challenges and risks that it seems like for some reason the baddest man on the planet won't do. So in that respect, it's not a great day for boxing. It is certainly a great day for free agency and free will on the MMA side of combat sports, being able to control your own narrative as Francis is doing, make decisions for himself as a business, as a fighter, and to test himself in a sport he always wanted to be a part of to begin his entire combat sports career. And I don't think a loss for Francis really hurts him in any way. Like, I know that if you look at it like, oh, if Tyson goes out and starches Francis, it might hinder his draw ability for the PFL. I don't know if I see it that way, because at the end of the day, this is not Francis's sport. He's going into a completely different sport than something he is dominant at. And while, yes, he's a big-time striker, this is not where he is dominant. He is dominant in the cage, and depending on how this fight goes, if he actually shows himself well and goes the distance with Tyson Fury, that could increase his value, as you could argue it did for Conor coming off of the Floyd Mayweather fight. So on Francis' side, I think it's a win-win, and of course for Tyson, he's going to get a shit ton of money to do it, so it's a win for him too. It's just a loss for boxing fans everywhere. MMA fans, I think we're always just down for the rodeo. Like, whatever's next, cool, let's run it. As long as it's a fight and it's one of our favorites doing it, we're down to watch. So I will be watching this thing. Don't lie to yourself. You will be too. October 28th is when it goes down. That's a late birthday present for me. It should be an easy victory for Tyson Fury, but Dana White himself once said Francis Ngannou hits like a Ford Fusion or something like that, the equivalent of a Ford Fusion going 25 miles an hour. I could be wrong, but that same man, after Francis left him, wouldn't give Francis any compliment other than to say he's not in the business of making gimmick fights. Just for Francis to steal the fight And then with his promotion, still the gimmick. And just a side note, and I have to say this because for all you boxing purists that sat there and complained about these influencers like Jake Paul bringing over MMA guys and boxing him, and why won't he fight a real boxer? It's a mockery of the sport to fight these guys that don't know how to box and make money off. The WBC heavyweight champion of the world just did the exact same and took a page out of the book of Jake fucking Paul. So I don't want to hear any more of you guys on your high horse about boxing this, boxing that. No, your heavyweight champion, arguably in his prime, not a Floyd Mayweather that was on his way out during retirement, but a man that had challengers for his championship, had fights that you all wanted to see against other boxers that are the highest level in the world, just did the exact same thing. Think about that. So what happens on October 28th? I mean, I think Tyson Fury is going to work Francis Ngannou, but I don't know it for sure. So, in Francis Ngannou's first ever professional boxing match, he'll be taking on the WBC heavyweight champion of the world. And what happens in that ring? I guess we'll find out.